Good morning. It's good to see you today. Thank you so much. This is the most fun service I do. And also, for those of you who are here for the first time, forgive my fans down here. So, they do this to embarrass me and to make me feel better as much as anything. But they're part of, that's right, Charles. They're part of my family and I love them all. But thank you for being here. But today is February 23rd. My wife and I just had our 44th wedding anniversary 2 days ago. So 44 years, it's a long time. So, especially when you're only 49, which I'm not saying I am, but she is. But we celebrate these milestones. 44 years is a long time. I mean, we've had a wonderful relationship. We travel a lot together. If you've never traveled with on a cruise or something, especially with your spouse, it really is 24/7. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you travel with someone a lot. And we do. We were just gone for 25 days and 24/7. And we came back and what we discovered, we still love each other. And we like each other. And it's just, I like to be with her and she likes to be with me. And I understand me liking to be with her. I'm just amazed that she likes to be with me. But it's a wonderful thing. Today I want to talk to you about this new year, 2020. So we came with this sermon series called 2020 Vision. So what's the vision? What's the agenda for this year? My agenda is simple. I really want everyone that I know to become a follower of Christ, follower of the teachings of Jesus. And if you never say, I don't want to be a Christian, I'm not asking you to be a Christian. There's all the steps to become a Christian. If we had memberships, there'd be steps to membership. But to say, I'm going to be a person who follows the teachings of Jesus is really to simply say, I'm going to live my life loving people and trying to be the best version of me that I can be. See, I don't think you have to understand everything to believe something. You don't have to allow the unexplainable to overshadow the undeniable. Just because I can't see it or explain it does not mean it's not worthy of my acceptance. You know what I could do if I'm not careful? I could spend all my time in the process of explanation. I've had guys say, I'd really like to debate you on that. And I go, yeah, we could debate that. And in my mind, I feel like I'm very strong and could do that well. But here's what I'd rather do. I'd rather spend my time loving others than debating something I believe. And here's what I've discovered also, is that you can believe something different than I believe, and we still can love each other. See, in the early church, for the first 300 years, there was this amazing lack of creeds, lack of doctrine, and these people who were followers of the way followed Jesus, and they met together, and they were kind of in community, and they appreciate each other. They never really truly agreed on all the same things, but they loved each other. What I've discovered is that today there's so many factions in Christianity, and I'd rather be a part of the healing the process than create more division. But Pastor, how's that working for you? Not very good. I probably create as much trouble as I start. I mean, I'm a person that, I tell you what's on my mind. I try to be as honest as I can, but I want you to know that I have your heart's interest. I want to see the teachings of Jesus survive another generation. I don't want the United States to become like Europe, big empty buildings with no life. And if we're not careful, that could happen. Most adults become Christ followers not because they have all their questions answered, they get their theology right, but because their questions become smaller. When God becomes more, the issues become less. So in 2020, I want us to focus on some important things. And 3 things I want to give you today. We're going to stay in this for a few weeks up until Palm Sunday and Easter. But here's the first truth. You can fill in the blank if you want. It's number 1. My complete vision or understanding is not God's primary goal. It's not like God says, I really want to make sure you get all your mental things in a row because you're human beings and you're going to think differently. Let me tell you a story. Robert Adair, a physicist, studied the science of hitting a baseball. Scientifically, he concluded with the reaction time, as soon as the eyes see it, there's a certain milliseconds, the brain catches it, and then the brain has to transfer that information down to your hands, and your hands have to transfer that to swing at the ball. And here's what he said, that scientifically, it takes a full half second for your body to respond to hit a ball 60 and a half feet. From the time it releases the pitcher's hand till it comes over home plate, 60 and a half feet, takes a full half second. Hitting a 90 mile an hour fastball travels from the pitcher's hand to the home plate in less than half a second. He said, therefore, it is impossible to hit a 90 mile an hour fastball. He said 7 milliseconds, which is 7 thousandths of a second, that's 0.007 thousandths variation, means it's going to be either fair or foul. So his conclusion, it takes a half second, you don't have a half second, it just is impossible. In 1980, I lived in Kansas City going to graduate school, and the Kansas City Royals were playing the New York Yankees in Yankee Stadium. One of the great pitchers at that time for the Yankees was Goose Gossage, and one of the great hitters for Kansas City Royals was George Brett. And George Brett got up to bat, and Goose Gossage threw him his fastball, and George Brett hit the ball out of the stadium into the upper deck for a home run. Howard Cosell, that's the name of the past. He said, well, it looks like Goose must have taken something off that 95 mile an hour fastball. The other commentator said, yes, it wasn't 95. According to the radar gun, it was 98. To hit a 90 mile an hour fastball, according to Robert Adair, is impossible. But here's a guy that hit one 98 miles an hour out of the stadium. It's unexplainable, but it's undeniable. In some areas of life, we really want the explainable rather than the unexplainable. I do. But in other areas of life, we have to embrace and face this, that some things are undeniable. And some things you will not be able to explain, even though you appreciate the fact that it works. Well, name one, Pastor. Oh, I can name many. But thanks for asking. What one? Well, just explain to me how the internet works. It's a matter of, digital. I asked a guy who was a genius in this area. He said, oh, yeah, it's about this signal, the pluses and minuses and the digital this. Every now and then someone can come along and explain it. But most of us, we can't explain it. But what we do want to know is that it works. And you say, well, it's undeniable. This message is in no way intended to discount your questions. But the way that adults become Christ followers, there is a way without having all their questions answered. Do you know how a wireless phone? I was in South America, the very tip of South America 2 weeks ago, and my daughter called me. And I'm just going, it's amazing. And I answered the phone, hey, how's it going? And we talked for a few minutes. How does that work? How can you pick up your phone and push a number and call something that's, 10,000 miles away or 8,000 miles away? How does that work? I don't know. But it's undeniable that it does. I don't know how computers work. I don't know how a wireless router works. I can't explain it, but it's undeniable. Most adults become Christ followers because there's something that happens that makes it personal. So what is it that's important to you that you're part of a community? Maybe it's a softball team that you're playing on. We just started our softball league. If you'd like to play, you need to talk to somebody, Jason Puckett, about that or ask about it. We have a softball team that plays Monday and Friday nights. Maybe it's not that, but maybe it's the music here. You go, man, I come to hear this music and it hits in something in me. Maybe it's because you take the Suncoast tour and you find out there's a vibe here. Something makes it personal for you. Maybe it's a coffee or a men's group or a ladies group or something that happens. Something makes it personal and you want to be a part of that, which leads me to the second thought. My vision grows clearer when the undeniable overcomes the unexplainable. There's a story found in John chapter 9, verses 1 through 7. Let me read some of it for you because I think it's a fantastic story. And it's got a lot of sarcasm in this story, and I'm going to play the sarcasm because I love that. So you love sarcasm. I had 8 brothers and sisters. Sarcasm is me. It's just the way I am, and I love this story because it's full of sarcasm. But John 9, 1 through 14, then I'm going to tell you some more of it without reading it. But as he went along, that's Jesus. As Jesus went along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Neither this man nor his parents sinned, said Jesus, but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. As long as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world, even light to blindness. After saying this, he spit on the ground. I read this and I go, my mother would never let me be Jesus. Mary must not have taught him. We just don't do that. You don't spit. But he spit on the ground, made some mud with the saliva, and he put it on the man's eyes. Go, he told him, wash in the pool of Siloam. This word meant sent. So the man went and washed and came home seeing. His neighbors and those who had formerly seen him begging asked, isn't this the same man who used to sit and beg? Some claimed he was, and others said, no, he only looks like him. But he himself insisted, I am the man. Then how are your eyes opened? They asked. He replied, the man called Jesus made some mud, put it on my eyes. He told me to go to Siloam and wash. So I went and I washed and then I could see. Where is this man? They asked him. I don't know, he said. So this is a fun story to read because within this story, there's a lot of what I want to talk about today. And within the story, they find just some interesting observations and some truths. The Pharisees, right after this, they find out this man had been born blind and now he could see. And they say, bring him in. We want to interrogate him. And they said, what happened? Tell us what really happened. This is verse 14 and following. He said, the man put mud on my eyes and he told me to wash it off. And I did what he said and now I can see. You know what they said? This man's not from God. Because it's the Sabbath. And you can't work on the Sabbath. You know, one of the 10 Commandments is remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. You know, this Jewish group, they embellished that and they created to where you cannot walk a half a mile on the Sabbath. A quarter mile is as far as you can walk. Even today in Jerusalem on the Sabbath, the elevators have the Sabbath. It's called a Shabbat is the word for Sabbath. Shabbat elevators, what does that mean? You're not allowed to push the button. You get on the elevator, you step back, and the doors shut by themselves, and they stop on every floor. So you don't have to work. Because that's a Jewish requirement. Now you go, that's just nonsense. Yeah, it is. But it's no more nonsensical than to say, this man is not from God because he's done something on the Sabbath. And here's what I would say, it's unexplainable because God would not do this on the Sabbath. It's unexplainable, but here it is. It's undeniable. How can a sinner, which is Jesus who healed on the Sabbath, because anybody that heals on the Sabbath or pushes an elevator button is a sinner. How can he do such miraculous signs? And they began to debate among the Pharisees, and they were divided. Finally, verse 17, they turned again to the blind man because they couldn't figure it out. They said, what do you have to say about him? It was you who had your eyes open. The man said, he's a prophet. And the Jews go, that doesn't work for us either. You know what they begin to say? Was this guy really born blind? Or are we being scammed? Because there's no way that this could be done on the Sabbath. So we must be being scammed. So they sent for the man's parents. And because they didn't believe his story. So it was not the miracle as much as it was a Sabbath that didn't fit their worldview. Here's what I want to suggest. When we opt for the visible, the explainable, over the undeniable, there's a problem. And I'm going to expand on that in a few minutes. But when we only believe what we can see, there's a conflict. We're in conflict with the undeniable. Let's go on a little more in the story. They brought his son in. You know what they said? Is this your son? And they asked, is this the one you say, you're lying, was born blind? How is it that he can now see? Now, if you're parents and you're being drawn into this court, a religious court, of course, we call it a kangaroo court sometimes, but this is their response. They're fearful. They said, you know, probably had a little conversation before we go in. Let me do all the talking. That's what I would say if my wife, let me do all the talking. And this is what they said, we know he's our son, and we know that he was born blind. But how he can see now, or who opened his eyes, we don't know. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for ourselves. Whew. Let's get out of here. We're not going to be incriminated today. His parents were so afraid of the religious leaders, they took the fifth. Hey, we don't know. We're his parents. He was born blind, but we don't know. It's not anything to do with us. Do you know that some of us have been raised in a culture where God was the answer for everything. Some were raised in the culture where God was not the answer for anything. But let me tell you about those who were raised where God was responsible. I grew up in that where God causes everything. God's created plan. God's in control of everything. So I go, well, what about cancer? Well, that God calls that. Why? For some greater good. Well, I did a funeral for a 2-year-old. You tell me that God calls that cancer for a greater good? What good could that possibly be? You see, all of a sudden you go, I may not be able to explain this, but I just deny. It's undeniable to me that there's a baby who died of cancer. So people say God causes cancer, he causes flat tires, he causes natural disasters. Some people believe that God gives them the parking space in front of the store. Now, I have trouble giving up on that one, I'll be honest. I always look for that spot. But some people are so looking for all the meaning behind these tragedies that they give God not the credit, they give him the blame. You know, there are many things that the historical church has taught that's deniable. It's not undeniable. It needs better explanation, and I deny it. 5 years ago, I wrote this on a little piece of paper. I keep it still on my dresser. And this is what I wrote 5 years ago, April 19, 2015. Somewhere along the line, I began to quit believing what I was taught and began to believe what made sense and what was revealed to me as truth. My journey is building my faithfulness. It's no longer a taught faith, but it's an awakened faith. See, I want your faith to be awakened. I want your faithfulness to be stronger. I've spent too many years as a church guy trying to justify what I was taught that just didn't make any sense to me. And finally one day as a PhD theologian, I began to go, I'm going to do some research because this just doesn't make sense. And I realized it doesn't make sense. And I deny a lot of that stuff. Now I want to teach that which makes sense. Today, God wants to pry open our little God box and let him out. I grew up with God was in this faith box. You know what that means? That if I had enough faith, God could do anything. I prayed for people. And you know, if you pray believing, then they'll be healed. But I prayed for lots of people who died. So when you ask me to pray for you, you need to think about that, right? Just let you know. But I realize it's not a faith deal. It's I care for you, and God cares for you. You know, I believe that God was angry with me, ticked off, ready to punish me and all humanity because we're just human. Jesus was my protection against this angry Father God. Today, can I give you some adult understanding of this teaching? My understanding has shifted. I don't believe in a God of wrath. If God is a source of life, live fully. I believe God is a source of love, so we should love extravagantly. God is a source of being, so be the best you can be. God loves people just like you and me. He does not cause blindness. He does not cause cancer. He does not cause heart attacks, flat tires, or empty parking spaces. So where is he? He's always right there, holding my hand. Sometimes I'm even unaware. I used the analogy before about having little children. Sometimes you hold their hand and you don't trust their hand, so you reach around their hand and you grab their wrist. And there have been many times in my life where my grip has failed, but his grip is solid. He's always there. See, I think that's good teaching. A second time the Pharisees called in this man who'd been blind. You know what they said? Give credit to God for your healing. And here's their presupposition. We know that this man Jesus is a sinner, so don't talk about him anymore. Give credit to God. The blind man responded, whether he's a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I do know, I was blind, but now I see. You get this? Here's a guy that comes in, he'd never seen it his whole life. He's brought back into this tribunal again, and he's being queried about this whole thing. I was blind. I think he wants to say, I was disabled, now I can see. Can we have a party? I mean, there should be a little celebration here. It shouldn't be this interrogation. And that's what I want to focus on today. Jesus came that we might have our eyes open to the true nature of God. It's not about man-made rules of the Sabbath. It's not about the religious system of the day. It's a statement, one that has been repeated many times, but even in the great hymn by John Newton, I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. The Pharisees asked him again what Jesus did to him. And after he's been asked, attorneys ask a lot of the same question. You're being asked and asked and asked, and they're acting like attorneys and grilling him. And they said, what did Jesus do to you? And he said, I've told you already. And then all of a sudden he has this question. I love the guy for this. Don't know him, the blind guy. But my favorite question is, do you want to become his disciples too? And they were furious. They responded, we are disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses. We are certain about Moses' certainty. We have a history of Moses' teachings. Jesus represents uncertainty. He was there, undeniable, yet unexplainable within their understanding of God, law, and religion. They should have said, and maybe we should too, what's happening here is going to make me rethink what I've always thought. They should have said, we've been wrong about Jesus. Our understanding of God obviously needs some correction. Instead, they say our understanding is right, and anything that doesn't meet our understanding or God in our box is wrong. They blasted Jesus as a sinner, a fake, a problem. Somewhere there's a problem. Either their understanding was wrong or Jesus was wrong. I pastored in the church of my youth for 17 years. And one day I resigned. I was pastor of the fastest growing church of that denomination in southern Florida. And one day a young guy, about 40 years old, have a PhD, rare in the church. And I said, guys, I just don't want to do this anymore. And people said, well, why did Larry resign? And the truth is, I just didn't fit. It seems like I was being nudged for something else. But the answer was, to me, I said, I don't fit. But you know what they wanted to say? Well, the reason he quit is because either we have a problem or he has a problem, and we're fine. So he has a problem. What kind of problem? Do you know they began to make up things about me that were terrible? That I had embezzled funds, or I had not been faithful to my wife, or I had some psychiatric issues. Now, I couldn't argue the third one, but the others I could argue. Here's Jesus facing similar rumors. Jesus, he has no credibility. If either we're wrong or he's wrong, and let me tell you about him. He came from the wrong town. We don't know who his dad really was. He's not of royalty. He wasn't of a priestly home. Jesus had and is a problem. He was unexplainable, but they could not deny the miracle of sight. In response to the Pharisees, the blind men say, now that's remarkable. You don't know where he comes from, and you start talking about his heritage, and you don't know where he's going, yet he opened my eyes. Now this blind man, he's just, listen to sarcasm. Now let me remind you, Pharisees, of what you teach. We know that God does not listen to sinners. He listens to the godly man, the one who does his will. No one ever heard of anyone, even a godly man, opening the eyes of a man born blind. But if this man were not from God, he could do nothing. So he's preaching to the Pharisees. Do you know how much they love that? Not at all. You know what their response was? You were steeped in sin at birth. The reason you're blind is because you're a sinner. How dare you lecture us? Throw him out. That's a great result. That's a great resolve to a lot of issues. Try that in your marriage. Try it with your kids. How dare you lecture me? I'm the authority. Throw him out. Now he was an outcast. And here's this healed blind man who had still never seen Jesus. Jesus heard that they had thrown him out. And when he found him, he said, do you believe in the Son of Man? He said, who is he, sir? He didn't say Son of God. He just said Son of Man. Who is he? Tell me that I may believe in him. You'd think he would have recognized his voice. Jesus said, you have now seen him. In fact, he is the one speaking to you. The man said, Lord, I got it. I believe. And he worshiped him. Jesus said, I've come into this world so that the blind will see And those who claim to see will realize that they have been blind. What a story. Jesus confronts the religious establishment with this undeniable truth. Their vision was off. It needed correcting. Here's the miracle of sight from God. So what's the point? The point is we need to keep our eyes for God all around us. What I really am fearful of is that I get really strong about something and I'm the blind person or I'm the blind leader. Instead of being wowed at the miracle of sight, they're ticked off that Jesus heals on the Sabbath. What blindness. And here's the last thought. Blindness is overcome when the undeniable is embraced. You know, you can say, Larry, do you ever doubt? Of course I do. Everyone doubts. But it's usually when I get focused and my God is too small in such a small box. Or it usually happens when I begin to tell God how to act, or I lose sight of that which is undeniable. You know, I make most of my decisions with my head. For all the things that are perplexing to us, you know, there may be an explanation. Sometimes I can't explain it, but it's undeniable. Like what? Once I was blind. Once I was so wrong about who God was. Once I was so wounded by this damaged view of God. But now that I see him in a different light, my life has changed. 2,000 years ago, a guy shows up in Galilee with a message of love and forgiveness. A guy that says, I am the light of the world. They became so upset with him. They were perplexed. They hated him. They threatened by him. They arrested him. They beat him up. They executed him. But he embodied truth. And that truth was raised from the dead. And that Spirit of Christ is still alive today. People around the world have embraced the love of God as their point of faith. I can't explain why God would love us so much, but I want you to hear me clearly. He does. I cannot explain why religious establishments are so full of hatred and fury, but they were. And I may not be able to explain fully how God works in my life, but I cannot deny his presence. I want to challenge you. Join me as we collectively not become members of a church, but we simply say, I'm going to follow the teachings of Jesus the best I can. Can I pray for you? Father, thank you for your love and grace. Thank you for taking us on a journey. Sometimes our vision needs to be cleared because all we see are things that block you. Today, in a moment like this, there's more clarity, more focus. Christ is alive. His Spirit is here, and we want to follow him. Thank you for the love of God. Thank you for this journey. We pray in Christ's name. Amen. Would you stand, please? I'm going to tell you a story in closing. And as I do remind you, if you want to pray about anything, there's someone up front who'd be delighted to pray with you. Becky and I live a couple of miles east from here. We have in our neighborhood, we have a few acres, but we have horses and cows and goats. We have a lot of wildlife. For example, we have foxes and bobcats, and we have lots of deer. Years ago, a large bird appeared in our driveway. We at first thought it was a peacock, but technically it was a female, so it's a peahen. The bird stayed on our property for days and days, maybe weeks. And we discovered that it loved the shiny black Honda Element in our driveway. This bird would stay by it, would sleep on top of it, go underneath it. We're determined that this peahen could see her reflection in the shiny black finish. And that's why she wanted to stay near the car. When the car would leave the driveway, in that long driveway, the bird would run down the driveway after the car like a dog chasing a car. And when he'd come back, he'd run up to the car, and it kind of, like it was all making up with it, it just loved to hang around that car for days and days. And I think it was because of the reflection. So here's my question. Why does God keep knocking at our heart's door? Why does God love you and me when often we're unlovable? Why does God desire to be in a relationship with us? Maybe, just maybe, it's because he sees his reflection in you. Maybe, just maybe he loves you and keeps close to you so that you will open your heart to him. It's unexplainable, but undeniable. He loves you today. So do I. God bless. Thanks for coming.